Good evening, everyone. I'm sure Councillor Turner will be here shortly, but I think we'll get underway. My name is Liz Schell, and I'm the Chair of Planning. With us, Councillor Neal, who is the Vice Chair. We have a number of staff with us this evening. We have our Director of Planning, Agnew, and Manager, Vendetti. And on this side, we have City Solicitor Ray, and beside her, Planner Lambert, Planner Sands, Planner Seafat, and Planner Wicca. And our City Clerk is Mr. Thompson. And I think that's the staff, so we will get underway. There are two public meetings this evening, three. But two are about the same thing, basically. Nope, okay. I will begin. This is the public meeting introduction that I read whenever there's a number of public meetings. Notice of collection. Personal information collected as a result of this public hearing and on the forms provided at the back of the room is collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes, which will be available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the Director of Planning, Building, and Licensing Services. The purpose of public meetings is to present planning applications in a public forum as required by the Planning Act. Following presentations by the applicant, committee members will be afforded an opportunity to ask questions for clarification or further information. The meeting will then be opened to the public for comments and questions. Interested persons are requested to give their name and address for recording in the minutes. There is also a sign-in sheet for interested members of the public at the back of the room. No decisions are made at public meetings concerning applications unless otherwise noted. The public meeting is held to gather public opinion. Exemption to this rule is outlined in bylaw number 2006-75 to delegate various planning approvals to staff and to adopt certain procedures for the processing of planning applications subject to delegated authority. Council has authorized staff to use discretion in determining if an application can be a combined public meeting comprehensive report to expedite the approval process. Public meeting reports are provided to inform the public of all relevant information. Information gathered is then referred back to Planning, Building, and Licensing Services staff for the preparation of a comprehensive report and recommendation to Planning Committee. This means that after the meeting tonight, staff will be considering the comments made by the public in their further review of the applications. When this review is completed, a report will be prepared making a recommendation for action to this committee. The recommendation is typically to approve with conditions or to deny. This committee then makes a recommendation on the applications to City Council. City Council has the final say on the applications from the city's perspective. Following council decision, notice will be circulated in accordance with the Planning Act, and anyone with an interest in the matter may file an appeal. Interested persons are advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of council to the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. And our first public meeting this evening is application for official zoning bylaw amendment, and it is 652, 662, 668, 670 Princess Street and 551 Victoria. And we will have a presentation by the applicant, please. Hello, Mr. Keane.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Committee, members of the public, and staff. My name is Mike Keane, and I'm a land use planner with Foten Consultants. And with me, I have my colleague Jamie Douglas from the IBI Group, and he's one of the lead architects of this project. And the owners of the property are also here this evening to hear input from members of Planning Committee and members of the public. So this evening, the application is for what we call 652 Princess Street, and it is an application for official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and a site plan control application. And staff are also asking during this public meeting for information related to community benefits. So in terms of the subject site before the committee this evening, it's located on Princess Street, centrally located within the neighborhood that we refer to as Williamsville. The property itself is flanked by Victoria and Nelson Street, and the gas station that's across the street on Victoria has a bus stop on it, and then there's the large redeveloped property kitty corner to the site. So just moving in a little closer on the site, you can see that the property contains a building in the northwest corner. The absolute corner of the property is a building that is listed as a heritage building. The site, you can see from the red lines on the drawing, goes down to the street that meets on the corner. It's largely used for parking on the site for various uses, and it's a full block access between between Victoria and Nelson streets. So just quickly take you through some of the existing use photos in terms of what exists there today. The site, as I said, is mostly vacant with the exception of the building on the corner of Victoria and Princess. And this building, the closest part of the building, this front portion with the stucco on it, is the portion of the building that's listed as a listed heritage building. And this is now kind of looking up Victoria Street, kind of looking across the property where you can kind of see the rear lane that traverses the site and looking at the back of the existing building. So from a Williamsville study perspective, this is the central area of the 3 areas of the Williamsville district, character area 2. And this is a primary destination area. And when you look overall at the thinking behind this area, this is an area where we want to see an increase in commercial uses. And it's an area that does have a lot of parking lots. And it's an area that is an area that we'd like to reshape the streetscape from a policy perspective. Looking more at the Williamsville study, when you look at the study, it looks at sites that have the potential for taller buildings, and you can see the subject site outlined in red. And there are a few other red sites, like Kitty Corner, which is now rebuilt as of a few years ago. And then there's a few other sites toward the end of the area. And the red sites, what they show are sites that have the potential for taller buildings. So in terms of the development proposal itself, it's a 10-story mixed-use building with 327 units, with a range of units from studios to 3 bedrooms. There is commercial space across the entirety of Princess Street, and then those commercial spaces also flank both Nelson and Victoria, so they wrap the corners in terms of additional commercial space, while the main front door of the residential is also got a lobby that would be close to the corner of Princess and Victoria Streets. Just to get into some of the renderings for the site, you know, this is a subject matter I know we'll be discussing a lot tonight. This rendering shows the listed building that I discussed removed from imagery. We did have a community meeting a few weeks ago, and I have an image that shows that prior image, which shows a ghosted structure of the former building. And we received some public input regarding that the other day, and as a result, we are thinking about the comments that we heard. So at the moment, we're not showing anything, but besides the fact we continue to hope to have a public parkette at that corner. So what you can see from these images as well is you can see some of the policies of Williamsville coming out here, where we've got 4-story street facades, and we have varying materials used across the street so that it doesn't look like a single facade. It changes the look of the building. And on Victoria Street, there's like a private area before the building starts, roughly 3 meters back. And what these drawings also show is the stepping that occurs at the 4th story, and then additional stepping that occurs at the 8th story. And you can also see how the bulk of the building is central to the site, as central as it can be, because the sites in Williamsville are normally not square, so hence the unique shape as well. So this is looking back at it now from Nelson Street and also Princess Street again. And what you can see here is the sidewalk, and then there would be another meter, which is called the clearway, which is essentially a space where when you're window shopping in the commercial facilities, you're basically off the thoroughfare sidewalk looking into the shops. And then in addition to that, the first floor is recessed, so there's another area that's protected along the face of the commercial building as well. And this was that image that I said before that we've received a little bit of input on as a result of our proposal to remove the listed building. In terms of the official plan policies, this is a special policy area, and we're within the center of that area. And the whole idea is to redevelop this entire section of Princess Street, to put buildings back on the street, to create that pedestrian-oriented form, and the uses are to be mixed use. So we want to see commercial mixed with office, mixed with residential, and really, filling in some of these parking lot gaps that exist from former automotive uses in this area. And the purpose of the commercial uses is really a series of small-scale commercial users in terms of serving daily needs. So you could have everything from smaller restaurants, barber shops, and at the same time, the commercial spaces are designed to accommodate larger tenants should somebody desire a larger space. They have 4.5 meter height, so they have nice high ceilings within those commercial uses. And in terms of when we're looking at taller buildings in Williamsville, as I pointed out before, there are policies within the study area specifically that target a few sites for taller buildings. And then studies are necessary to justify any height beyond 6 stories. So as this is an application that is for an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, it is to address those study requirements to deal with the fact that the proposal is a 10-story building. And because of the unique shape of the site, and as we've seen with other projects in Williamsville, it's very difficult to say specifically what the height of the building should be, how the angular planes would work, and how they would be implemented. And as a result, the proposal is to take an approach that Toronto uses, which is almost like putting a site plan in the zone that shows you precisely where the height can be permitted. And the advantage of taking that approach is that the building I show you tonight, or the building that ultimately gets hopefully approved by this council, would reflect exactly what was shown, so that it doesn't have room for deviation by using simple numbers for setbacks and height. The area in Williamsville has special zoning on it, recognizing a range of uses, really providing for setbacks, almost zero setbacks everywhere, because the intent is to create this continuous street facade. But again, when we get over that 4 to 6 story range, and because there are angular plane requirements, zoning bylaw amendments are necessary for anything taller than 6 stories. And the H is a holding provision, and that holding provision applies to Williamsville because there are areas that are constrained from a service perspective. So while the city continues to work on its big dig to relieve those constraints, the properties all have a hold to ensure that if a project comes forward, there is capacity to service it. So the proposed zoning that's before the committee tonight most certainly requires relief to proceed, and everything from height, angular plane, parking, loading, bicycles, and amenity space. So I have a table that I can show for folks that want to see it, but just to give you kind of a quick rundown on it. The street wall height is required to be a maximum of 13.5 meters. So that 13.5 is that 4-story wall. And our design of our building is 13.5 meters, but we're seeking relief to allow 14 meters, which allows that variability to deal with things that come up during construction. And to give you an example, when the building steps to go up to the extra height, there are construction materials that are used in the ceiling to carry those load-bearing adjustments. Angular plane, as most people are familiar with, there's 2 angular plane provisions in the bylaw. There is one from the 13.5 meter height, and then steps back at a 45 degree. And the rear angular plane is a 45 degree angle that starts at the ground and goes forward. So as a result of the zoning provisions, many even shorter applications are coming before this committee to address angular plane. And the method to address angular plane on a 10-story building such as this is to go through an urban design review. And that review will justify whether or not it's suitable. And further to that study, the city uses a peer review body to review that study to essentially say whether they agree with the first study, and also to suggest suggestions for change if not. Similarly with parking, the proposal is for half of a space per unit, and we're also proposing to reduce the commercial parking space available. And as a result of going to half a space as well as accommodating the parking for the commercial use, this site would also require 12 spaces to be located off-site. So there would be 152 spaces on-site, and 12 spaces would have to be located off-site. And off-site spaces are not uncommon both in downtown and Williamsville. Loading space is based on, again, area, and we are proposing a single loading space rather than 2 for this building. Bicycle parking, similar to car parking, requires 1 space per unit. So that means this building requires 327 bicycle parking spaces. We are providing 292. We are short roughly 30 bicycle parking spaces. And all of those bicycle spaces are in secure rooms, both in the underground parking garage as well as the main floor of the building. There's a large room for bicycle parking that is secure. And the amenity space for the site is the other area that requires a reduction. So 327 units, mixed number of bedrooms in each unit. The required amenity space is 8,429 square meters. So that is a little over 2 acres of land, and the site itself is a 1-acre parcel. So what is proposed is 7,085 meters, so roughly 1,400 meter deficit. Now, the amenity space in this building is made up of a gym, there's an atrium, there's a lobby, and you'll notice from the renderings that most of the units had either terraces, balconies, or the lower buildings which can't have balconies or terraces have closed-in semi-outdoor space. So as a result, there's a large amount of private and shared space that make up the amenity space that's proposed. So in conclusion, this project will implement the Williamsville Main Street study, which does contemplate a taller building at this location. It does represent pedestrian-oriented format that is in the style that we'd like to see to basically support this Princess Street transition. And the overall densities within this primary hub are really what we need to see to really help our public transit evolve. We need to get more people on Princess Street on our high-speed transit corridors. And the studies that are done include shadow studies and noise studies, and all those technical studies help to inform impacts and ensure that there are not negative impacts on adjacent neighbors. And those studies are all reviewed or peer-reviewed by staff. So at the end of the day, this proposal conforms to the provincial policy statement and is consistent with the general intent of the official plan. And I have a number of other slides and pictures should folks need to see those as questions come up. I'm pleased to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much. And could I hear from staff? And I'm going to add a little something because this is new. Staff are also seeking input from the community through this public meeting process with respect to potential community benefits related to the proposed development. Could you give a short description of these, what a community benefit would be, so that people get a chance to sort of think about it in advance, please?
So, thank you, Madam Chair. First, just to speak to the notice requirements, notice of this statutory public meeting has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act. Signage was posted at the subject site on all street frontages 20 days in advance of the public meeting. A notice was mailed to all 131 property owners within 120 meters of the site. A courtesy notice was also placed in the local newspaper on May 30th. In terms of community benefits, Mr. Keane mentioned it in his presentation. Staff confirmed that in accordance with Section 37 of the Planning Act and Section 9 of the official plan, the city would be seeking possible community benefits for this application for any increase in height or density that council may approve for this property. In terms of possible community benefits, they're outlined in Section 9 of the official plan. I can just list what's there in terms of public transit facilities, improving access to those facilities, providing public areas, pathways, connections to external public pathway trail systems, providing public and or underground parking, providing community and open space facilities such as small parks, daycare centers, community centers, recreation facilities, cultural facilities, and providing public art. Staff have prepared a guide, public guide that's been made public on the city's website in terms of community benefit guidelines. They're out for public input, but they have not been finalized at this stage. So we're really using the policies in the official plan to guide discussions on community benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe from a previous application, heritage can also be a community benefit. Thank you. And to the committee, are there questions from the committee? Councillor Neal.
Yes, and thank you for commenting on the public meeting that we were able to have 3 or 4 weeks ago at the Memorial Center. There was a good turnout for that, and as you heard, there was expressed concern about the potential loss of that listed heritage corner. It's the second oldest building in Williamsville. And right across the street from it is the similar aged building, which is now the Yellow Deli, which is beautifully restored. And personally, I think some kind of a restoration recognition on those two corners right across from one another would be a wonderful introduction to driving into Heritage Kingston at that point. So I hope that you're able to take that. And I know that the stucco application is with screening and nail guns and may have damaged the limestone beneath it. But if there's any way of having a rendering on that corner that respectfully reflects that heritage and that era, 1840 something, would be great. So I know that a recent peer review study for another property just down the street from you drew on some of the ratios and held up favorably what Toronto has, which is 0.5 for one-bedroom units or bachelor units. I think 0.75 perhaps for two-bedroom, and 1 unit for 4 or might be 3-bedroom units. So in recognition of that, I think giving a blanket 0.5 per unit, given the density that's being sought here, may not be ideal for the community. And I just want to say that. I look forward to the study. I look forward to the peer review that will follow. But those are two concerns. I will say there are some obvious things that you've recognized in the Williamsville study and the Williamsville plan. The fact that you have a throughway, laneway behind the building to service all of your commercial on-site property, and the moving in, moving out, I would assume as well, will allow for not having what we have on Lower Princess, which is a hodgepodge of delivery trucks throughout the day on the main streets. So I applaud you on that. I look forward to some explanation on angular plane. I think that's always the weakest link in trying to develop greater density within the confines of the Williamsville zoning. This is a large lot, and it was recognized, I know, in the Williamsville study as a potential 8 to 10 story building, given the footprint. So in respect of that study, which we had lots of community input on, I'm not as concerned, but we need to address angular plane. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth.
I'm happy to lightly respond, if
Yes,
that's
please.
okay. Through you, Madam Chair, I want to say for sure we're not taking the heritage matter lightly. One of the things I said at the former public meeting was that I was not going to propose any changes from that meeting to this one, because these are the materials that are in the public forum. But I can say it's not a matter that we're taking lightly. It is also the heritage impact study that was prepared by us as the development team is also being peer reviewed by a third-party expert. So that will help inform, what we might do at the end of the day. And that was a large reason why we changed the renderings, at least for this meeting, was to not show the ghosted structure because it was not received well, as you pointed out at the other day. Angular plane is interesting, and if you're following the adopted official plan changes, the changes that occurred to the adopted official plan that we hope the ministry will approve very soon for the city really clarify the intent of angular plane and the intent of urban design studies. And the simple fact is that there's not a single property in Williamsville that you could build even eight stories and meet the angular plane. The angular plane is kind of like an as of right type number. So in a sense, you don't want to have a building that can fit within the angular plane because the trigger point is the urban design review study. So that's why what you see in buildings like this are, various stepping and various areas of the building that are cut out. And interestingly, there are actually areas of this building that do meet the setbacks because this is actually the largest site in Williamsville. And so there are pieces of the site that meet angular plane. But further to the study that was done to help inform the building, it's another one that the city also hires a third-party peer review agency. And honestly, I can say I've yet to have a peer review that just puts a check mark on it. So I think there will be comments that will be coming that we'll have to address. Thank you.
Thank you. And one question I forgot to ask, and it isn't meant to be facetious, but it's in relation to another project that's come forward. So it needs asking. Every bedroom in this proposal will have a window. Is that accurate?
I would hope so. I mean, I don't know if we've done any unit layouts.
I see the architect nodding.
I mean, I should have looked at Jamie for sure. Yes?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think we should clarify whether there was a public meeting before this public meeting. Could you just clarify what that meeting was, please?
Certainly. Over the years, either through the Williamsville Association or through me, we've invited people in the immediate neighborhood through the community associations to come and see the plans prior to when they come to planning in the public meeting. Once it comes as a public meeting, we're all quasi-judicial responsibilities, and so I don't meet with developers after the process has begun. But prior to this meeting, it gives the planners, the developers, an opportunity to show and to get some immediate feedback from the neighborhood. And that took place, and I thank you for attending that meeting as well. Oh, you didn't? Oh, I apologize. I thought you were there.
Well, actually, that's why I'm asking, because as far as I know, it wasn't something that council knew about. So I just wanted to make sure that that's why Mr. Keane had said what's in the public sphere is what has been presented this evening to the
Thank you.
public. Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Councillor Osanek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, question to Mr. Keane. When you were saying about the off-site parking, I just wondered, do you have any sort of idea where that might be, how far away, and how many spots would be offered off-street parking?
Yes, certainly. Through you, Madam Chair, the current proposal would see 12 parking spaces off-site. And at this point, we have not selected a site, but the proposal, similar to other ones, we've done traffic analysis, and the proposal it would be to amend the zoning from the standard 60 meters to include a range up to 400 meters. We've seen setbacks greater than 400, 500 meters and beyond, but for this project, given the large amount of parking in the area, it was felt that 400 meters would easily accommodate the off-site spaces. Now, saying the proposal right now is 12 off-site, pending our peer review of our half a space per unit, some subtle changes could happen that might require us to have more.
And would some of those spots, either on-site or off-site, be visitor parking? Or are you going to be offering visitor parking?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. I mean, we haven't evolved the site to that point, but absolutely, as part of the parking requirement, the commercial spaces and the visitor spaces are all kind of at grade, and the visitor spaces and commercial spaces will likely serve double duty in terms of evening anyway, at least like if there's commercial spaces that aren't being used after a business is closed, that would provide additional visitor space.
Thank you. And just a question for not so much that picture looks good, but for some of the other pictures like in our agenda tonight, you know how you have the first 4 floors being like a red brick, I suppose, and then the facade above it is like gray. And I'm just wondering, like when it goes to site plan, do you think you'll be revising it? I just think it looks a little bit boxy and almost like Princess Street Towers, to tell you the truth, with it being gray. Like I'd prefer it maybe being all red. And I know that's a site plan thing, but I just wanted to put that on the table tonight and ask for your opinion.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, certainly the proposal for the first 4 floors is a brick facade as opposed to limestone. And one of the goals was to keep the upper part of the building light and close to the window color, so that blue-gray, like you say. But, you know, I think also the peer review, when it comes back on the urban design study, could also help inform if color changes are necessary. So I take your comments seriously, and we'll make sure it's reflected back.
Thank you. And my last question is, so that is a little courtyard of green space in the center, and I just wonder if I read it right, and I just wondered, with the shadow studies, like will it ever get the sun, or is that little courtyard in the center always going to be in shadow?
Well, through you, Madam Chair, it's kind of like an atrium with a glass roof to let light in, but I think just the fact it's 4 stories, it will be like indirect light, right? So I don't, other than when the sun is right straight over on top, I think it'll be indirect light. There's probably...
Okay, I probably had that wrong. So it's enclosed then? It's not like that's how people could go outside. It's enclosed?
That's correct.
Okay.
It's really within the heart of the building, and it is like an atrium feature with a roof so that it's year-round. Yeah.
Any other questions from the committee? I'd like to open the meeting now to members of the public, please. We have a microphone on this side, and Mr. Dixon is ready at the microphone on this side. So if you could give your name and address, please, and keep your questions and comments to 5 minutes. We will gather all of the questions and comments and ask Mr. Keene to respond to them all at the end. And I'll start with Mr. Dixon, and you'll be able to hear the microphone, but there's a little button at the very bottom of the microphone. We'll all be able to hear you. So, Mr. Dixon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have another meeting, so thanks for getting me in early. I appreciate that very much. Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting proposal. I live nearby, so it's 495 Alfred Street, Apartment 2, K7K 4J4. So I've been looking at the billboard that's there for quite a while. I'm liking the combination of local investor with outside investor. Very interesting. So I'm generally supportive on grounds of higher intensification of residential need, proximity to amenities, on arterial, on transit, close to Queens. All those are positive. Just in summary, I would say that I would be happier with about 75% of what you propose in terms of the massing, the height, and the angular plane being steeper than I would like. So something around 8 stories would be my preference. I will go along with what Councillor Neal was talking about in heritage preservation. I think he said that very well. I think when Mr. Keene was making his presentation, when he was talking about area, he was using meters where it should have been square meters. So that was a little bit misleading there. Looking on page 17, where you have the details of a lot of the numerical stuff that's going on in rather small print, just at the top left-hand corner, you're looking at, I guess, the side and front yard elements. And what I'm wondering about, it says that the 1.5 meter setback from Princess Street. I don't know if you can find that slide, or people on the committee could look at that. And then you have the Victoria Street and Nelson Street numbers as well. So what I'm wondering about, that it seems rather small, you're talking about the street wall and being on near the street, but that's the setback from the sidewalk, right? You've got the street, and then you have the sidewalk, and then the setback from that is 1.5 meters. Just want to have that clarified. I'm liking the design of the parking access from behind and all of your deliveries, so that seems very efficient. And I can just add a cautionary note on the shadow studies. At the OMB hearing for the University Suites development, which is also done by FOTEN, there were many problematic aspects of the shadow studies, not taking daylight saving time into account and so forth. So I would like to see very high level of care and detail on the shadow studies here, because I think we're going to have possible problems given that you're on Princess and then that you're on an angle, sort of, at a right angle to where the sun is coming in from the summer and winter, right? So you're going to have a big shadow cast across the street, and that's the so-called public realm. So I would just like to make sure that that is on the record as being something that the planners need to take a lot of care with, and that the planning committee and citizens need to have the accurate rendering of that material. Thanks very much.
Thank you. James is going to help you. There you go.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Frank Marr. I live at 551 Victoria Street. I've lived there for about 17 years, and I thought that I'd come here tonight and just say that beyond all the discussion of design and how it's going to look, how close it is going to be to the street, etc., nobody seems to talk about the fact that the people who live at this building are going to have to go and find themselves either new homes or the people that rent business space are going to have to find new places to have their business. There's a drop-in center below me that has been there for over 5 years, and they're going to have to find a place to do what they do, which is they help hundreds of people a month. There's a nail salon. There's, of course, people are going to have to find new places to park their vehicles, even trees that are going to have to be cut down that are quite nice, and have provided some shade for the building. So while I think anything I say here isn't really going to make my home still be where it is this time next year, I just thought that I'd come and say that these type of developments, while there's nothing inherently wrong with them, they still have impact on people that isn't always talked about. And I hope I can find another place to live. I think it's not easy in Kingston, but I'll do the best that I can, and I'm sure the other people who live or rent retail space will do the same. And so I just wanted to come and let my voice be heard. And so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
neighborhood, sorry. I always think my voice is really louder than it is. I don't actually live in this neighborhood, but I spend a great deal of time in this neighborhood with friends and their dogs. I'm sorry. I live on Baden Street, which is quite a way away from this neighborhood. But as I say, I spend a great deal of time walking the dog with my friend in this area, and I've become enamored of it. It's a lovely part of town. And I'm very concerned about a couple of things. One is the fact that there are a number of people's homes that will lose all sunshine when this is built. This will block the sun from hitting their houses, from lighting up their windows. And that is never a happy thing for anybody. But another thing that really concerns me, and this is my bean counter coming out, is that Stats Canada says from 2011 to 2016, which would be 5 years, there were 435 newcomers in Kingston. That's 87 people a year. There are already empty units all over this city. I know I live in a neighborhood where quite a lot of them are. And I go everywhere in town, and I see places for rent in the middle of the school year, not just now when all the students have gone home. And it concerns me that a huge amount of money is going to be spent to build a huge building which will, in fact, block the sun from many people that I know and care about, and will probably, to some extent, sit there half empty. This is not the only new build that is proposed for this city in the next year. Where I live, near the Portsmouth Harbor, they want to put 2 great big high-rises right in the middle of the inlet where all the boats are. And I think that'll sit half empty too. It really concerns me because in the race to build something fabulous, and it does look nice, I like the look of the building, I have to say, but in the race to build something that looks nice and that gives you a reputation as a great builder, you can't just run over people. And I think that that's part of what's going on here. I don't think you're going to fill this building, and then, as happens with every building that was ever built and not filled, it starts to be a nasty mess. I think it's ill-conceived in the size and shape that you're proposing. I think it is unnecessary and therefore wasteful. And I walk that area so often with my friend and her dog that I can tell you, I see empty places all over the place already. And I'm not talking about now that school's out. It's been through the whole winter that there are empty places all through that neighborhood. And that's a neighborhood that's close to the university. It's not like there isn't some pressure on that neighborhood. So I think really, I've probably waited till too late to say this, but I really do think it needs to be rethought and downsized. And if you look at that picture, even though it's made to make it look as nice and tidy and neat and small as possible, that is not like anything else on that part of that street. It just isn't. It doesn't fit. It's not a good fit for the need. It's not a good fit for the look. It's not a good fit for the height, and therefore blocking other people's sun. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of Planning Committee. My name is Vicki Schmolka, and I'm here with Dr. Annette Burfoot on behalf of Building Kingston's Future Incorporated. Building Kingston's Future Incorporated is an Ontario incorporated not-for-profit corporation whose objects include, quote, promoting the value of the City of Kingston's stated goal of being a smart and livable city by promoting human-scale streetscapes, access to the waterfront, active transportation, and resilience, end quote. We have reviewed the staff report and planning rationale for the reference project and offer these comments and questions for your consideration.
The Williamsville Main Street study was completed in 2012 after extensive work by consultants to the city and multiple community meetings. It was integrated into the city's official plan by bylaw number 2013-147, OPA number 21. The recent official plan review, which made over 1,500 changes to the plan, did not include revisions to this section of the official plan. One must therefore conclude that the public, city staff, and elected officials all agreed with the official plan's provisions regarding building height, step backs, angular plane, and so on. The vision for this section of the city, the guiding principles and the stated goal, is to have a cohesive plan for the future development of the properties along the Princess Street corridor, which takes into consideration sustainability, the protection of natural and cultural heritage features, intensification targets, appropriate built form, active transportation, and economic development. It is disrespectful to the official plan and the public process that brings it into effect to see this development application requesting 11 variances to the zoning bylaw, which incorporates the principles and clear direction of the official plan. It is distressing to read that this site is categorized as being in the, quote, Queens neighborhood, end quote, in the staff report, page 6, and the nearby parks listed as Victoria Park, true, and Breakwater Park, odd. This site is clearly part of the Williamsville Main Street study area and should be referred to that way. We question the reasons for demolishing a listed heritage property built in 1849 and which housed the Konofsky Bakery. Substituting a sculptural ghost and footprint seems inadequate compensation for the loss. The height, allowed maximum building height 20 meters, proposed building height 32.9 meters. This is a 65% increase in height and is not acceptable and completely out of scale with the streetscape that was approved for the Princess Street corridor. Angular plane. Please review the consultant documents that led to the planning rules for the Princess Street corridor. The point behind angular plane requirements is to keep building heights in check and proportional. The relief requested should be denied.
A livable city. And I'm sure councillors appreciate this. Nothing upsets the common sense of security in a neighborhood more than people driving around residential streets looking for parking. This driving around also contributes to greenhouse gases and is not a sustainable approach. This proposal asks for a reduction of off-street parking from 349 spaces to 168 spaces, and asks that 12 of those required spaces be provided off-site, and as we've heard, up to 400 meters away. How many of you go 400 meters to get to your car, and how realistic is that? And that's in page 9 and page 33 of the planning rationale. This represents an unacceptable reduction of 163 residential spaces for a building that is proposed to have 327 residential units. As well, the 12 off-street sites are more than can be 400 meters away. When there is a closer spot on the street, inevitably a driver will take it. This will not be solved by a permit system. There's just going to be competition for spaces on the street. Overall, increased parking pressure on the neighboring residential streets will inevitably lead to complaints to city councillors, bylaw officers, and the police as driveways get blocked and people get angry about more traffic on their street and not having the access to their homes that they previously enjoyed. That's why a new building is supposed to provide adequate parking on site. For commercial parking, the applicant is requesting a reduction of 18 spaces from 22 spaces to 4 spaces, and a reduction in loading spaces from 2 to 1. This is completely impractical. It's proposed that the building provide 615 square meters of commercial space. Presumably, several people will be working in these commercial spaces, and they will have customers. Where will they all park? On the street, forcing customers or clients to park further away on the residential streets? Ground floor commercial is part of the vision for Princess Street corridor in Williamsville. It must be supported by adequate parking. There's also a request for relief from the zoning bylaw requirements with respect to the size of parking spaces, including barrier-free parking spaces. Has the city's Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee reviewed this request and accepted these changes? In general, shrinking the width of parking spaces makes it more difficult for people using walkers and other mobility devices to maneuver, and reducing their length means that people using an accessible van often cannot park there. The bicycle parking reduction requested in both number of spaces from 327 to 292.35, and in the sizes of the spaces from 1.8 meters to 1 meter and from 0.6 meters to 0.4, so shrinking how much space there is for a bicycle and getting to and from your bicycle is being requested. How is this bicycle parking to be provided? Does it enable people with an e-bike to use a parking spot? Does it provide hanging bicycles? How will this work for some people who do not have the strength or height to lift a bicycle into place? What are the security measures to prevent damage from other adjacent bicycles, theft of accessories or the bicycle, and tampering? Is there a repair workbench within the building? When a bicycle is a primary means of transportation, which this is suggesting because it's reducing in parking, it is essential that parking is secure and accessible. Finally, the consultants who worked with the city on the Williamsville Main Street study and resulting planning rules are highly regarded in the province. They carefully calculated how to encourage development that would revitalize the neighborhood and still be profitable for developers. What is the value of a public process to establish a vision for a street and a neighborhood when the established rules are then ignored at the first opportunity? Given the significant relief requested and the lack of respect for the principles in the official plan and the Williamsville Main Street study, it is our expectation that the city's recommendation for community benefits will be meaningful should the proposal be approved. Could you, as our elected representatives, please respect the study and the vision that we all shared and require the applicants to follow the official plan and the zoning bylaws? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. There's a little button. If you'll push it and the light, oh, there we go. Thanks, Marnie.
My name is John McLeod. My partner and I live at 111 Nelson Street, K7L3W9. I'm an associate professor of medicine at Queen's. I teach second, third, fourth year students, as well as second year medical students. The problem I have with this proposal is, first and foremost, it will destroy the Nelson Street residential neighborhood because of the increased density that will occur. Left out of this proposal is the fact that directly across the street on Nelson is a new building that's being built that will be 5 stories. And we've already, over the last 6 years, measured the rate at which noise has increased from students that are living along the street. Property theft has increased, and such a substantial miasma of high density will be the finishing of the street as a neighborhood. And I would suggest that the council adheres to its bylaws, that if the 5-story building directly across from this one is okay, there's no need for a 10-story building. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
Well, that and the fact that, I don't know, as a scientist, I know what peer review means. And it means that your work before it's published is sent out around the world and then judged anonymously. So the idea that planners can peer review things, I suspect, is quite differently than how we used peer review. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am? You're on. Oh, you're off. Could you press it one more time? There we go.
Oh, it's on when it's red, okay. Judy Vandenhoek, 179 Toronto Street. I'm glad that the Williamsville Main Street study, Area 2, has been officially declared by this development because it was an incredible package. Many, many hours and human resource went into that. Great expertise from all of those that took part in it. And we took it seriously. For a lot of us, it was our neighborhood and still is our neighborhood. We attended all the official plan, all the meetings we had for the drafts, because we wanted to ensure that the Williamsville Main Street study would be incorporated into the drafts of the official plan. And I take great exception to the developers that try to step outside of the boundaries of both of the official plan and the Williamsville Main Street study. Number one in my heart, for those of you who know me, and I come before the planning committee numerous times, parking. Tonight, Mr. Keene, I quote you, this is your sentence, "This area has lots of parking lots," unquote. I've lived in this area for 10 years. I would love to know where all these parking lots are, because right now they're parking on the street on Victoria, Nelson, and Toronto Street. You're asking for a reduction in parking. You very conveniently take the minimum requirement, and thank you, Councillor Neal, for pointing that out, from Toronto. I'm a born and raised Torontonian. So when you use statistics from Toronto and try and implant it in our community, I want to know that it's really feasible. You conveniently took the minimum, and I don't think in this instance the minimum is appropriate. You need more than half a parking space per unit. I've come before council before that I don't think parking spaces should be delegated per unit. I think it should be per bedroom. So once again, I put my 2 cents worth in there. Councillor Osanek asked the same question that I did. Where on earth are these 12 off-site spots going to be? I know I would not be walking 400 meters or 500 meters, carrying my groceries from my car to my apartment. Bikes, which you requested the reduction in parking because there were going to be so many bikes. I've checked your website and you're definitely selling to the student market. However, you have 91 and 12 units that have more than 1 bedroom. So you have over 100 units where there will be at least 2 people living in them. And are you assuming there's only going to be 1 bicycle in each of those units? So by far, 1 per unit is not even enough, and you want less than that. I'm wondering about the amenity space. You said the amenity space includes gym, atrium lobby, as well as private balconies. I don't know how you came up with your calculations of the 327 mixed unit gives you just over 8,000 square meters. You're asking for a reduction to just over 7,000, so you admit that you have a deficit of 1,000 square meters when the total isn't even just over 8,400. That's a major deficit. So I'd like to see an increase in the amenity spaces that are given to those residents. When we're talking about the residents, let's talk about the community benefits. And thank you to the staff for quoting the Section 9 of the official plan. You gave us an incredible list, but I didn't hear any of those that pertain to this development that I can see as a benefit to my community. The only one would be the through lane that they are going to keep, which Councillor O'Neill mentioned. Yes, I applaud you for not removing that laneway. They need it. However, that was the only thing that I could see that pertained to a community benefit. The heritage, Councillor O'Neill mentioned this. The heritage in the 1840s area definitely needs to be included. I was one of the ones at that May 10th meeting, and the meeting was open to anybody. It was not a closed meeting, and it was well publicized. You heard that we did not like that ghost idea. There are many places, and if you want to refer back to Toronto, there's some in Kingston as well as in Toronto that are able to incorporate historical buildings within their units. And I believe that's what should be done here. The public parquet at the front corner, I just want to remind people that there is grass and there are trees on that property right now. Those will be gone, and I asked about the public parquet. It's going to be concrete or some kind of stonework. It will not be green space.
One minute, please. One more minute.
I urge them to include green space, which has been removed from Williamsville on numerous occasions. My 6 points that I covered were parking, the last one, angular plane. Sorry, Councillor Neal, I think angular plane is very important. We kept the angular plane in our Williamsville study so that we would not get 10-story buildings. Angular plane, I feel, is very important. That's why we wrote it in the Williamsville study. Councillor Osanek brought up the two-tone color. I brought that up as well. So I think no reductions to the parking, no elimination of that 45-degree angular plane should be allowed. Bikes need to be increased. Amenity space needs to be increased. I want to know exactly what the community benefits are, and I want to see where that heritage building is incorporated. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is John Lynn Bell. I live at 269 Kings Court Avenue, K7K4P9. I lived in the Williamsville area for 16 years in my youth. Just a little background here, if I may. I have been a member of Princess Street United Church for more than 70 years. 2 years ago, the executive of the church was asked by the city if we wished to have our building declared a heritage site. At that time, we said no. Within the last 2 or 3 months, we were asked once again, this time if we wished to have both the church and the manse, which is the brick house that fronts on Princess Street beside the church, again declared a heritage site. Once again, we said no. In their wisdom, the city apparently has gone ahead and designated both of these buildings as a heritage site in order to, quote, preserve the heritage of the street front. Both the church and the manse were built in 1931, making the buildings 86 years old. In 2004, Gord Smithson and 4 other persons wrote the Williamsville Revisited book. It was an extensive history of the streets, neighborhoods, families, and especially the buildings in that area. Of these 5 writers, only Barbara Bonner, this lady in blue behind me, and myself survive today. Barbara's ancestors are the true veterans of this area. Her family, her ancestors, lived on the Upper Victoria near Concession Street area for 137 years prior to 1986. They were the initial residents there. The Konosky Bakery building, which we refer to as in the southeast corner of Victoria and Princess, was built in 1849, making it 168 years old. My concern to the planning board would be, if you can designate 2 buildings, i.e. Princess Street Church and the manse, which are 86 years old, will you please stop the demolition of this 168-year-old building in order to, again, preserve the heritage of the street front. The developer mentions ghosting the building. I cite as an example, and some of you may not be old enough to remember this, the ghosting of the building, the round corner Mowat building at the corner of Princess and Bagot Street, which was formerly the commercial place for the Laura Secord store, if you remember. It was mentioned in Margaret Angus's Old Stones of Kingston, and when it was allowed to be ghosted, you can see what we have now. That is my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Gavin Anderson. I live at 702 Newmarket Lane in Kingston. I prepared some statements, but I want to go off script just for a moment to comment on two things that I heard during the presentation. One was towards the end, Mr. Keane made the statement that this proposal implements the Williamsville Main Street study. If that were entirely true, then we wouldn't be here tonight discussing this proposal. In fact, there's a great list of variances and exceptions that illustrate how it does not implement the study. The second comment I want to make is I was a bit concerned about the exchange between Councillor Neal and Mr. Keane regarding 10 stories and the setbacks and angular plane. And it sounded to my ears that was a rather sort of casual dismissal that it was perhaps the expectations of the setbacks and the angular plane that were somehow inappropriate. And that in order to build a 10-story building, the compromise needed to be made in the expectations around angular planes and setbacks. And as we've heard from previous speakers, I think that's entirely inappropriate. If those conditions cannot be met, then it's simply a fact that the building is too tall and has to be reduced in size and height so that those expectations can be met. In terms of what I came here this evening to say, we know that the site is within the area defined by the Williamsville Special Policy Area. I have 4 questions for Planning Committee members. The first question is, do any revisions in the official plan or in any zoning bylaws made after February 21st, 2012 amend, add, or delete anything in the Williamsville Main Street Study Urban Design Guidelines? My second question to you is, was the investment in the Williamsville Main Street Study Urban Design Guidelines money and time well spent? My third question is, do the Williamsville Main Street Study Urban Design Guidelines represent good urban planning and land use? And my fourth question is, will the city defend the Williamsville Main Street Study Urban Design Guidelines when considering this application and any subsequent OMB appeal made by the developer? I believe that the answers to these questions must inform Planning Committee as it weighs the applicant's request for relief from, by my count, 2 official plan requirements and 9 zoning bylaw requirements. The applicant is also proposing to demolish 1 heritage building. From my perspective, the Williamsville Main Street Study Urban Design Guidelines stand unamended as city policy. They were money and time well spent, and they do represent good urban planning and land use. And they must be respected in assessing the merits of this application and defended, if need be, in any future OMB appeal. I'm asking you to reject this request and insist that the developer work within the principles and rules set out in the Williamsville Main Street Study and Urban Design Guidelines, at which point they can truthfully say that the proposal implements the study. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Excuse me. My name is Tony Jenkins. I live on Latimer Road, RR number 1, Elginburg, Ontario. And I think that gives me the prize for the guy who came the furthest to speak here tonight. I am speaking not just for myself, but for my friends who live in this neighborhood. And I do spend quite a bit of time in this neighborhood. I know it well. I wish to emphasize the word neighborhood. In Mr. Keane's presentation, he was careful to show photographs of the existing conditions. These very conveniently began and ended at the site and the site only. This is not being built in a vacuum. This is not being built in isolation. This is not being built in Toronto. Your proposal does more than ignore the well-being of the neighborhood. Your proposal is, as someone said earlier tonight, ill-conceived and unnecessary and not a good fit. It's too tall, it's too big, it doesn't complement the neighborhood in any way. Its net effect would be destructive to the neighborhood. An example, parking's been mentioned often. We're not really worried about someone taking our parking spot on the street. They will, that's for sure. And at some days, or well, actually most days, since the city's made a few changes, there are not a lot of vehicles parked on Princess Street. At 6 o'clock or shortly before, there were only 3 of them, on Nelson Street, between Princess and Mac. Big, long stretch. And we like that. We can look out our window and not be looking at someone else's car. Our children, in my case, grandchildren, and there are many within that 120-meter distance that got notification from your proposed development. They can play on the sidewalk safely. If their ball goes on the road, they can see who's coming, people can see them. If your proposal is built, the residential streets will become linear parking lots. No one's going to walk 400 meters to one of 12 spots, which are in itself just a fraction of what would have to be accommodated under your proposal, other than on the site. No one's going to take that walk when they can just put their car in front of my house, somebody else's house, wherever, and leave it there. They have to get out and move it. Maybe they can only leave it overnight. There's different rules in effect. But generally speaking, yeah, what you're asking is, we like to maximize our return here, so we don't want to include the necessary amenities, and we're going to put that responsibility or that burden onto the neighborhood. No thanks. You get the impression, I hope, that this proposal, if it is accepted in anything that asks for any kind or requires any kind of amendment to either the official plan or the zoning bylaws, will be resisted. Now, looking at the building, 2 reactions. I can digress just for a moment. How's my time? A couple of weeks ago, I bought a small red Italian sports car in downtown Montreal. I've never owned or driven such a vehicle. It was raining. It was rush hour. I had to get on in the expressway. I don't know why they call them that there. There was a large truck that wanted to occupy the same space that I was in. He had no concept of the angular plane. There I was, right at his axle. I mean, this was a frightening experience. But when your picture flashed up on that screen, I was even more frightened. It's too big, it's too tall, it's inadequate in providing amenities for those who would live there, and it's really not suited to that location, to that neighborhood, or maybe even to this city. I thought I'd fallen asleep a couple of times when I heard reference to Toronto as often as I did. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this side? There's a little there's a little button at the bottom. There you are, you're on. Thanks.
Hi. My name is Robert Grant. I live at 515 Victoria Street, which will be very close to the proposed site. I would just like to add my voice in opposition to what I've heard from the developers today. The community is already densifying with the buildings we already have and the one on Nelson Street that's growing. If we make one this big, it'll be too much for the neighborhood. I won't go into all the details because they've been very well covered by other people, but parking, traffic, the works. So as someone who will be deeply affected by it, I've lived there for over 25 years now, I would like to suggest to the council that they insist on major changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, my name is Daniela Cruz, and I live at 530 Victoria Street, which is directly across from the proposed zone where the building is going to go. Now, the first thing I'd like to talk about is the noise this building is going to bring to the neighborhood, both as it's being constructed and potentially after it's constructed. There's construction currently on Nelson, as several people have already remarked during this meeting, and the construction there is the noisiest thing I think I've ever heard in my life. You can hear them drilling all the way down by my house and 2 streets over. It's been brutal. I haven't been able to sleep well for the past few nights, and it's otherwise ruining what is generally a very nice, quiet neighborhood. My concern with this building when it is built, if it is built, is that the noise for construction will be much the same as on Nelson, especially with the underground parking that I believe is proposed with this, and that it will affect myself, a student, as well as the other students in this neighborhood, the students beside me, beside them, and across the street. On top of that, it's not just university students in this neighborhood. This neighborhood is also a lovely neighborhood where there's many families who have little tiny ones. And they go to school too, and they need sleep too. And the noise is just that bad that I feel like a lot of people on that street will definitely be negatively affected by it. As for when the building is built, the general demographic in Kingston is students, and I feel like a majority of the people who will move into the building will be students. Now, speaking as a student, we're very loud at times, and a bunch of students in one building will be incredibly loud, and that is something that I am very much not looking forward to once this building goes up. The second thing that concerns me about this building is the height. As someone who's living directly across from the proposed site, I get a very beautiful sky view and a very beautiful sunrise every morning. And this 10-story building will block that for me, and it'll block most of the sunlight for me as well as those of us living in that neighborhood. My opinion in general is that you should adhere to the bylaw and not make it above 5 stories, because it's a 10-story building, and that's something you would see in Toronto or Mississauga, in the GTA. It's not a trademark of Kingston, which I find as a city is more like a historical, charming small town. And seeing a building like this built, while it's very nice, and I appreciate the aesthetic of the outside, just because the area from Victoria to Division is very lacking in looks, it's nice, but it's not the kind of building the city needs, is essentially what I'm trying to say. And that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Oh, hello, John.
Good evening. My name is John Grenville. I live at 24 Jenkins Street in wonderful Williamsville District. Tonight I'm speaking on behalf of Sue Baisley, Hart Cantillon, and Joan Bowie, who are all residents of Williamsville District. Before I make any comments, I want to state that we all supported the Williamsville Main Street study during the public consultation in 2011 and 2012, largely because of the protection of the neighborhoods north and south of the main street. The angular plane and the step backs were the major elements that protected the neighborhoods. The angular plane not only affects the availability of sunlight that's been mentioned a number of times, but also contributes to comfortable pedestrian scale, provides a transition to low-rise residential on the north and south sides of Princess Street, and ensures privacy through minimal overlook. The planning rationale notes quite rightly that the Williamsville Main Street study allows buildings up to 10 stories. However, one of the key elements in the successful design of taller buildings is the angular plane. And this development takes advantage of the 10-story part of the study, but disappointingly does not meet the angular plane requirement. The Main Street study also recognizes the importance of trees and green streets and encourages parkettes. Assuming 5% of the land will be given over to the city as part of the parkland dedication, this would provide approximately 2,400 square feet. There's been reference to parquet tonight, but I did not see a parquet on the plans. We're hoping that the city planning staff will follow through with the city's policy of parkland first, with land deeded to the city as parkland. Provision of sufficient parking is an issue, and a number of people have mentioned it. Parking study concludes the 0.5 spaces per unit as being adequate, and a large part of the justification is the fact that it will be occupied by students who have a lower rate of vehicle ownership. Whether this is the right number or not, this completely ignores future occupants of the building who may or may not be students. Parking study for the adjacent development immediately across Nelson Street concluded that 0.76 spaces per unit were needed. Councillor Neal made reference to a peer review of a parking report for a development a block away, which concluded that 0.5 spaces for one-bedroom units was adequate, but that 2- and 3-bedroom units needed 0.8 spaces and 1 space per unit. The proposal for 0.5 spaces per unit also ignores the study commissioned by the city to examine parking in the Princess Street area. And the city's own study on parking ratios concluded that new development should provide 0.5 spaces per unit. The proposal for the listed heritage building on the property is inappropriate. My working career was spent in the heritage sector. I've seen steel frames for buildings erected to represent buildings that had long ago disappeared, but I've never seen a proposal to demolish a heritage building and replace it with a steel frame. You, Planning Committee, and some of you may have picked up the recent correspondence. In the most recent correspondence, architectural historian Jennifer McKendry prepared drawings that show the potential for this heritage building. A couple of drawings, including one of the entranceways, which in fact is still there. If it's appropriate to replace this building with a steel frame, the city would have a hard time saying that this was not an acceptable practice anywhere else in the city. Since the city sees itself as the place where history and innovation thrive, it's important that built heritage on its main street receive the protection that it needs as part of this development. The last issue I'd like to comment on is the matter of the height and density bonus. The advisory notice to residents, and has been referenced tonight, asked for ideas on what the community benefit might be. And we'd like to make a recommendation for what the community benefit might be, but we think it's premature until we know what will happen to the ideas that are submitted. Ever since the development at the corner of Victoria and Princess was given a height and density bonus in 2013, I've been asking what process the city is following when it comes to height and density bonus. Planning Committee has yet to receive and subsequently cannot yet recommend a process that will be approved by the city, ultimately be approved by council. And for that reason, we're hesitant to make any suggestions at all until we find out really what the process is all about. Let me conclude by restating that development on the Williamsville Main Street is critical to the success of our neighborhoods and is something that we support. However, in its current form, the development that's in front of you needs further work. There is sufficient concern, and we've heard it tonight, and we are pleased to hear that the planning, that a peer review will be done on the urban design study, the parking study, and the heritage impact assessment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rhonda Candy, and I'm representing the business or organization at 629 Princess. So we're very close to the units in question as well. A lot has been said, and I'm going to just highlight, so my voice is heard here tonight as well. Parking, congestion, quality of life for people in the area. I don't know how long it would take to correct the infrastructure, sewer, water. I think that would be a grueling process. But I think if this is approved, you're setting a standard, you're making a trend. This building is not the only one in the area. It's been mentioned already. When are we topped up? When is Williamsville full? How much can it sustain? I'm not opposed to change. I think change is good. Kingston grows. We need to be vital. We need to be open-minded, but I do have concerns about the height, as everyone else does. I think a 5-story building would be tall, but it would be something that we could grow accustomed to. So 10-story is asking us to accept a lot. So that's my opinion on that, and people that I do represent. I wanted to also ask a question. I do believe I heard a quick comment about after 6 o'clock, most businesses have parking lots that can be utilized. I may be incorrect, but I think that was mentioned tonight. So our parking lot will not be utilized after 6 o'clock. So don't consider that as an option, please. And I want you to consider the parking on the streets. People will be using the parking spots. I know the long-term plan, Kingston's trying to be a smart city, shooting for it. We're doing very well, I think, in attaining our goal, but it's not tomorrow. It's not going to be in 2 years. People still drive vehicles. So I'm of an age that it took me 25 minutes to find parking tonight to be here. And I did walk 5 blocks once I found parking. So I'm still able to do that, but in 20 years, I'm not gonna be here because I don't want to do that. I won't walk 5 blocks to get here. So that's one thing I would consider for future. Students are great, we need it, they're vibrant, they bring enthusiasm into the city, but it's not just young people you have to consider. So I'll question as well, how will this building affect property values? Williamsville is, it's a modest community, I think is fair to say. What's going to happen? If you own the building right beside the new units, and I know there's some buildings that are houses that are gonna be right beside it. I look at the hole out my office window every single day, which is beside where you're going to build. Yeah, I have a front row seat for that jackhammering. 3 days nonstop jackhammering, which is a little crazy making, but it's something that if a long-term goal is to be achieved, has to be done. But property values are going to devalue, I think. So I'd like that to be considered as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
You'll have to excuse my voice because I have none. My name is Sharon DeLine. I live at 14 Durham Street. When I walk at my porch and look to the right, I will see a 10-story building if it is that this is built. I already look across at the Patry building, which looks better in relation to this than it did some years ago to me, because at least I can still see the sky. When I looked at the Patry building this morning and I envisioned, and it's 5 stories, and I put another 5 on top, I felt sick to my stomach. I did some phoning today too, and I understand that this is going to be a new commercial build, and so therefore, contrary to what Mr. Fehrenstein said at the meeting at the Memorial Center, The rates that are going to be applied in terms of taxes will be the same rate that a residential, someone like myself, will pay, but relative to whatever the impact dictates the units to be. I cannot see how this is going to be a great tax revenue for the city of Kingston, because as it has been pointed out, whether it's sewer, electricity, or other, the thing is fire, it's going to be consumed and regurgitated. We will not see a penny of it. And so therefore, our taxes, which will go up according to schedule to 2.9 next year, 4.1, and then 5.0, will mean that we are paying for the deficit. This is not good. This is not good. It's inconsiderate, and as someone else pointed out, it's a kind of bullying, a steamrolling into the community. This contributes to a tunneling of Princess Street that is of Toronto proportions, and it's, as I've said before, had I wanted to move to Toronto, I would have done it a long time ago. This is Kingston, Ontario. Thank you.
You're on.
My name is Melanie Cronk-Reed. I live at 147 Nelson Street. I have lived in my house. I bought it in 1999 as a Queen's student at the Faculty of Education. I have 2 children. They are 2 of no fewer than 17 children who live on the stretch between Princess and Mac. These are families, as Tony mentioned. I know my neighbors. My children play on the yard. They play out in the street. I walk to school. I teach at Sydenham Public School downtown. My children go to Sydenham and Toreto. They walk. We live here at this location because it is a neighborhood that is safe. It's walkable. I believe in the philosophy of having a city that encompasses these ideas. If you build this building, I cannot see myself living there anymore. It won't be a safe place for my children. It's just too big. I'm not disagreeing that we need development in the neighborhood. I would love to have a human-sized building on that property. I would love for there to be lovely retail shops. That I'm not against that. But this is not something I can see being filled. I don't see it as fitting in the neighborhood that right now has a beautiful blend of students, retired people, professors, doctors, teachers, all in that one stretch that I live on. This would probably be the end of our street. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you just, yep.
My name is Jay Patry. I'm the owner of the building directly across the street from this site. This is about 500 bedrooms that will come in direct competition for the students that I have in my building. So I'm probably one of the most affected people here. I've heard a lot of people making statements about parking and bikes and such. And as the person that owns 500 bedrooms directly across the street, I thought I would give my experiences to the committee as well as to the crowd. So we have 500 people living across the street, and we have about an uptake of about 110 cars for that. There's a little bit higher uptake with the smaller units than there is with the larger units. I haven't been able to get on Dash to actually see what the proponent's proposing here, and I missed the first bit, but just in relevance, we have 110 cars for 500 kids, and I think they're proposing more than that. When people are talking about bicycle parking, we've provided 144 bike parking spots at our location. Maybe 30 or 40 are used. Anything more than that really is a waste, to be quite honest. People are talking about taxes. I've taken a brief look at their website, and I'm guessing there's about $100 million in sales here. So that's about $1.6, $1.7 million a year in taxes. Make no mistake about it, this will be a net generating profit for the city. The kids will not use $1.7 million worth of tax revenue from the city. There's some talk about 10 stories. I do feel that that might be a little tall on my side of things, but it's a nice looking building. From my perspective, I think it's a lot better than what's there right now, which is a derelict couple of buildings and an empty lot that's been there for 20 years or something like that. I do have a little bit of concern about the city continuing to go down the road of bedrooms without windows. I'm the largest student landlord in the city. I can tell you that you need bedrooms with windows. I haven't been able to see this proposal in its entirety, but I really think if we don't have windows for every bedroom, we need to look at that really carefully, and maybe, as much as people are going to hate me to say this, enlarge some stuff a little so that we can get kids with bedrooms that have windows. Like that, everybody here wants to wake up and look at the sun in the morning, and we don't want to look at it through a glass wall. So like I said, I haven't seen this. I just know that some of the other proposals I've seen have a lot of those proposed, and I think that if they're able to pull that off here, that's great. I was here about 3 or 4 months ago when they were trying to propose an interim control bylaw, which in it was catching up a property that I have downtown, and everybody was irate about these creeping additions that are happening throughout and destroying all the single-family homes. And oddly enough, I smiled when multiple times my project was the one that was put up there as what we should be doing. So I'm here to kind of remind people that it's give or take. Either we can develop and build a beautiful Princess Street that's vibrant, or we can lose all of our neighborhoods and all of our schools that go with it when we lose all those homes. The last thing that I want to say is the city seems to think we want commercial space along Princess Street on all of the retail levels, and I think that's a mistake. I see Brian Springer sitting across the street, and he can probably tell you exactly how much vacancy there is on lower Princess Street. I know the site that we have, we struggled to rent our spaces. I'm actually in one of them because we can't rent it. We've got another site that we sold out of, but we had it for a lease and we couldn't lease it. All of that retail is going to be a problem. A few years ago, Amazon and retail online was like 5% of retail. Now it's 15%, and they're proposing in the next 10 years, online shopping is going to be 45%. So if we're going to build AAA commercial space here, who's going to fill it? Is it going to be empty, or is it going to rob from our downtown that's already struggling? So I just would caution the city to try to make sure that we're flexible with that space, and that maybe they're putting amenities in that space instead of commercial, like gyms. If there's a gym in the building, I don't know. I wish that we'd put our gym actually on the main street and made it accessible to the public or something. But I know right now that all of that commercial space they will struggle to fill from firsthand knowledge. I think that's about it. And like I just want to reiterate one other thing about impost fees. They're going to pay $4 or $5 million in impost fees. That's going to help. People are going on about the sewers and stuff like this. I was the one that was the impetus to putting that sewer system in down Princess Street, and I think it was about $7 million we paid to do it. They're going to push back $4 million. Of that, Marnie will tell you exactly what the number is, but it's about 15% goes to parkland, something like that. So they're paying $600,000 for parks. So the little parkette there, it won't survive as grass because there's going to be a lot of traffic on it, but maybe they can green it up somehow. But try to remember that development also creates taxes, which helps us with all of the things that the city's asking for when we want new parks or new arenas and everything else. And also try to remember that out of everybody here, as much as you guys are affected, it's my pocketbook that will certainly get affected by this project. And I'm here saying I think it's good for the city of Kingston. As I have to compete against it, it will affect me directly. Thanks.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this application? This will be it. So this is the time to speak in public this evening. Of course, you can still email and phone the planner on file, but tonight is the public meeting, so if you wish to speak, please do so now. Because once I ask the proponent for his answers, that will be it. Okay. I will ask Mr. Keene, please, to respond to the numerous questions and issues.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to members of the public for your comments here this night. And there are many comments that I do just want to absorb and take back. You know, as I've noted, we have the architect team here. The owners are present to hear all the comments received tonight. So please do not take offense if I don't directly provide you with an answer to your question, because there may be certain questions where I need to consult with the project team. But know that staff will expect answers and will be addressing those questions to us through technical comments. So, and I did note that Mr. Dixon isn't here anymore, but one of his specific questions related to the Princess Street sidewalk. And so the way the Williamsville policy works is that in addition to the public realm, the private land is to provide an additional 1 meter clearway. So in addition to the public right-of-way, there's 1 meter that is clear with nothing on it. And then in addition, because the building is recessed, there's another 1.2 meters that is in addition to that in this case. And Mr. Dixon also pointed out a point about shadow studies. And while we may not agree on his points, what I can clarify for all in the room is that the shadow studies that are prepared do take into account daylight savings time. There was concern by one of the residents in the building with being displaced. And certainly, should this building ultimately be approved in some fashion, the businesses and the people who currently live in the building will most certainly be displaced for a time. My experience generally in these situations is that the people that own the existing buildings usually want to keep their tenants and find ways to place them in close by accommodation. And so ultimately they can bring them back to their building. You know, there were comments related to who will live in these units, and there are no restrictions to who can live in these buildings. The proposal is to condominiumize the building, which means ownership for units, and those owners can then live there or rent those units. So at the end of the day, you have a mix, but ownership is made up by multiple owners as opposed to one single owner. And as a result, those owners are responsible for upkeep of the building and the common grounds and restrictions on units and so on and so forth. And there was a comment about how this building looks nothing like anything else on the street, and I most certainly agree. And I think you know what I hope council and staff and even people of the public are proud of is that this Williamsville study was prepared and produced, and I appreciate some people don't feel as I do with respect to how this implements that guideline. But you can see by the volume of applications that are occurring in Williamsville that the plan is a success. And it is going to change this area. And you know, I can honestly say that we have done our best to respect the guideline, and we look forward to the review by the third-party reviewer to see what might come of it to affect further change. There are comments about parking reductions, and there were comments that were slightly misplaced in terms of saying that what we've proposed is a Toronto parking ratio. And to defend Councillor Neal, what Councillor Neal said was that the Toronto provisions are actually higher than what we're proposing. The provisions that we're proposing are consistent with other applications in the city of Kingston at a half a space per unit. But what Councillor Neal suggested was that may be too low, because even Toronto has a higher number if you break it down by units that have more bedrooms. So that matter will be resolved by the peer review, And I do appreciate the comments from Mr. Patry with respect to his building across the street and the utilization there. It is helpful information. Obviously, with change, there is concern with how it will change one's neighborhood. And I actually believe the buildings along Princess Street preserve the neighborhoods that are off of Princess Street. And because when you can provide accommodation, and I'll use the student word, what people are really concerned about is having homes converted to multi-bedroom units. Well, by building units that can accommodate everybody and providing a surplus of units, you diminish the amount of conversions that occur off the main strip. So the Williamsville study provides this area where intensification is expected that ultimately takes pressure off our near-campus neighborhoods and our downtown neighborhoods and our traditional neighborhoods. There was a comment on how I said there were lots of parking lots in the area. I maybe should have said vacant lots or underutilized lots. This site itself is mostly a parking lot. Across the street directly is a used car dealership. My comment with respect to lots of parking lots was related to the fact that this was an area that was car-centric, car dealerships, and a lot of parking lots as opposed to buildings. So that was really the context of my parking lot comment, but also to respond to the other business owner and the comment about using the business's parking for the people that live there. And just to clarify on that point, the point I was making was that this building itself will have parking spaces that are for the businesses that operate there, in addition to visitor parking. And I said that on this site in particular, in the evening after the business is closed, there may be potential for the double use of those spaces. So I was by no means referring to people using other people's property at nighttime to visit. If they do that, you would fully be within your rights to ticket and tow. Again, I'll echo the fact we've heard loud and clear the comments with respect to heritage and the listed building, and city staff are again having our work peer reviewed, and we will be implementing the results of discussions that will occur as a result of those studies. And we respect the interest and concern for that building. It was thought that I may have been casual and dismissing the angular plane, and I would like to say absolutely not. I think as a planner, my understanding of angular plane and setbacks is different, and I do try my best to explain myself as a planner and how that works. And what I said was, angular plane is a number, and it's a principle, and it's for all the principles that we've been discussing tonight: shadow impact, setbacks, making a nice public realm. So when a building requires amendments to those angular plane provisions of the zoning bylaw, studies are necessary to ensure that the principle of what the angular plane does still remains in place. And so we've suggested it is, and that study will be reviewed, and if there's disagreement, then some changes could result. There were some comments with respect to noise and related to construction. And I mean, I think, if there's noise occurring at night, the city has noise bylaws, and you should be contacting the city to note activity that's abnormal past noise restriction times. So besides the fact that noise bylaws apply to construction, they apply to people making too much noise, partying, or whatever else. So the city has tools in place to deal with noise. There was comments about servicing and the concerns, and I think, we've heard a little bit about servicing. I mean, I think I echoed at the beginning of my presentation, this whole area has a holding provision on it until servicing is sufficient to serve these buildings. And at the same time, without these proposals, we don't get the impost money to do those upgrades. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg scenario, and they'll work together to ensure that Princess Street sewers are separated and upgraded and to accommodate the future. There were comments about the neighborhoods not being safe, and I'd like to think the people living in this building will become your neighbors, and that they will be respectful, that you will become friends with many of them, that some of you in this room may even choose to live in this building. It is going to have all the amenities of what we expect in our modern buildings, besides having private outdoor space. It doesn't have rooftop amenity. It's accommodated through indoor spaces, as I noted, the atrium, the gym, but there's some lovely terraces and balconies that will make these very nice units, and a range from bachelors to up to only a few 3-bedrooms, but mostly we're talking the smaller units in this building. I believe... I think there was a comment again echoed about bedrooms with no windows, and I believe we had said earlier that the bedrooms have windows, but at the same time, I don't know that we fully designed out the actual units, and ultimately building code prevails with respect to bedrooms and units, but the comment is well received that obviously a bedroom is best with a window. So is that fair? Again, if you feel I've neglected your comment, I assure you it's not intentional. I've tried to take notes, and I'm pleased to answer any further questions of committee.
Thank you. And are there further questions from the committee? Councillor Neal.
Just a couple of comments, if I can, and perhaps you can jump in. First of all, to staff, I believe that we have a construction noise bylaw that prohibits noise from 7 to 7 or 7 to 9? 7 to 7. So anybody who is being kept up because of construction noise, they need to call bylaw or call me, because that shouldn't be happening. Now, it's happened with some construction in the past. If a contractor wants to go beyond those hours, they have to go through a public meeting process, and council has to approve an extension of those hours. So you'll receive something on your door if somebody is asking to go till 9 or 10 o'clock. But there should be no noise after 7 o'clock at night. So there was some mention about the community benefit. And the whole issue with community benefit is something very new. I think it's been applied officially to maybe only one proposal up until now. But the reality is that our official plan talks about full community neighborhood consultation. And the city has a new consultation policy as well. So we just need to adhere to what we said we're going to do and have full neighborhood consultation about this. Because community benefit, as much as staff have an interest in the city, it needs to be the community that gets consulted on that. So, peer reviews. I totally applaud the idea of an urban peer review on this kind of a complex project, especially in this case on heritage, but I look forward to that peer review. Parking lots were mentioned. The zoning in Williamsville doesn't allow for surface parking. So any of the existing car lots are there only because they're existing non-conforming use. If they stop being a car lot, somebody can't automatically turn them into a parking lot. That would be against zoning. They would have to get a zoning relief. Perhaps staff could speak to that.
Thank you, and through you, that's correct. So the policies in our official plan that were brought in with the Williamsville Main Street amendments do not permit surface parking lots along the Princess Street corridor that are directly accessed by Princess Street. So there are some legal conforming, or legal non-conforming, I guess technically, uses that existed prior to the passing of those new policies that remain in effect until there's a discontinuation of that use or there's a change of use. But there are, as a rule, we do not allow new surface parking lots along the Princess Street corridor.
Thank you. And there was some, and I just want to mention that another project that's going through an OMB review right now addressed their parking deficit by proposing an off-site but nearby parking garage structure, which they're proposing to build. That would be one way you might choose to remedy the problem of insufficient parking. The 1 meter clearance, I applaud that in the study because properly administered, it allows us to have those beautiful trees and the site plan improvements that we haven't yet seen on Princess Street. Now, we haven't seen them because some people haven't lived up to their site plan agreement, which would have allowed for benches and that. But, and I'm presuming that those beautiful trees that you're proposing along there will be part of the site plan that staff work out with you, and indeed within the required number of days from occupancy, you'll be able to have those trees and streetscape. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, I mean, through you, Madam Chair, I think as you noted, Councillor Neal, this is a piece of Princess that hasn't been rebuilt yet. So there's a lot of things that will likely happen for a building like this to come into effect. Because the servicing has to be replaced in this area, the whole street is essentially rebuilt. So the land, the extra land is there to help with providing that nice boulevard. And I mean, I can't absolutely speak for the applicant to say that the plantings will go in, but the staff takes security, so if my guy doesn't do it, then you can have the money to do it.
Thank you. And my very last point, there was some mention about this not generating taxes. If anybody wants to correct me, I know that a few years ago when I looked into it, condominiums actually generate around 40% more in property taxes than detached and semi-detached homes on a value basis. And unless that is changed, this will generate an awful lot of taxes. That shouldn't be how we decide. whether we need to approve it or not. But I just wanted to make that point clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee? No? Thank you. So there are no other questions. I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation and answers, and remind everyone that you can still get information through the planner, who will also be dealing with Mr. Keane. So thank you very much, and with that I'll close our first public meeting. And I will open our second public meeting, which is address at 270 Frontenac Street. It's an application for a zoning bylaw amendment. And we will hear from the proponent.
Yep. You're okay now? Yeah, thank you. Here we go. Hi, thank you for letting us come to speak tonight. My name is Ray Zabak. I'm an architect, local architect from Kingston. My client, Mike Willis O'Connor, is here with me tonight. He's at the back of the room there. This project is very sort of clear to understand what we're proposing here, because the almost exactly the same building was constructed on the site at 274 Frontenac Street about 3 years ago now. Mike owns both those properties, obviously, and he has determined that he wants to duplicate that design on 270. This is, we're looking for relief in two aspects of the zoning in this property. One is the property is about 75% by my calculation of the size it needs to be to accommodate 2 single-family homes under the current 8499 bylaw. The other variance that we're looking for, the other deviation we need, is leaves the side yard setbacks. We're required to have a minimum side yard of 3 feet on one side of the property, but the cumulative side yards have to add up to 1/3 of the width of the property. In our case, in order to do that, we need relief of about 1.1 meters, or maybe 3'6". I brought some slides of the, you have this in your report, obviously. Those are the only 2 areas of relief we need on the property. What the building is, there's a plan of it. It's a duplex. It's 2 units, 5 bedrooms in each unit. You know, obviously, I think no question this is catering to student use. I think the building at the adjacent building at 274 is inhabited by students. 10 beds in that building. There'd be 10 beds in this building as well. That is the building. What you're looking at there is the building. That's the actual building. Sorry, the actual building at 274 Frontenac Street. That's one of our neighbors there. That's a closer look at it there. You can see there's 1 unit on each side. It's a symmetrical building with corner entrances. That's an actual photograph of the building with the building Mike currently owns next door. It's a kind of 1950s vintage bungalow. Sort of sprawls out toward the back of the property. The idea is to take that down and build that. So I'm going to be brief. I know that last one was quite long, but again, quite simply, we're looking to do the same thing. And the same relief, I think, was granted on the property at 274. Almost exactly the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I hear from staff, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, The notice provisions were met in accordance with the Planning Act. 110 property owners were notified within the 120 meters of the subject property. Thank you.
And there was no correspondence?
There was no correspondence received for this application. That's correct.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Councillor Neal.
A question that I hope staff can address when the comprehensive plan comes over is just if this constitutes sound infill development. And I know that unlike our previous conversation about a 4-year-old zoning bylaw, this is a 30 or 40-year-old bylaw, I believe. It's quite old. So some variances are to be expected. The other thing that I'll be looking for in the comprehensive report is some assurance that the number of bedrooms prescribed in the plan indeed are the number of bedrooms that appear, because some developers have added bedrooms in the construction phase or developed basement bedrooms without the compliance. And so I would assume that the zoning will prescribe this number of bedrooms as are being applied for.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. We're reviewing the application right now. All of those considerations you've brought up, we can address in the comprehensive staff report.
Thank you. So when I ask that question at comprehensive report.
Could I just clarify?
Thank you.
First of all, there is no basement. This is a slab, so it won't be a basement apartment, unless Mike digs a basement out underneath the house. If you looked at the plan, I don't think there really is any opportunity to add bedrooms to this property.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? No. I'd like to open this to the public. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this application? Seeing none. Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
And with that, I will close our second public meeting. And our third public meeting is zoning bylaw amendment, address 1232, Highway 15.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Planning Committee staff, and there you go. My name is Yuko Leclerc. I'm a land use planner with Foten Consultants. Presenting an application for zoning bylaw amendment at 1232 Highway 15. More specifically, this is applying to Phase B of the Riverview subdivision. The intent of this subdivision, or this zoning bylaw amendment, is to remove some spot zoning that's on the site. I'll get into a little bit of detail on that shortly. Starting with a bit of context, the subject site is just under 5 hectares. It's in the city's east end on Highway 15 on the west side. It's in an area that's very well serviced by transit. The express route runs right in front of this area. There's a number of community facilities in the vicinity. You've got parks, multi-use trails and pathways, a future community center being built just a couple of kilometers south. But it's primarily a residential area where this is being built. The area just to the north is some previous and existing subdivisions. Phase 1 of Riverview is nearing completion just to the south here. There's a future phase that will be built out to the west. And then if we jump across the street on the east side, we've got the St. Lawrence Business Park and then some more residential neighborhood to the south. So if I can go into a little bit more detail about Riverview, Phase A is nearing completion. If you've been out there, those houses people are living there and they're very close to finishing out. So they're moving on to, the developer's moving on to Phase B. The final approval process is quite far along. The technical review is coming along, and applications have been submitted, and that's led to this particular proposal for zoning bylaw amendment. There's been some changes in the lot fabric, as often happens when there's a number of years between draft approval and final approval. So the number of lots in Phase B has actually decreased by 3. It's gone down from 89 to 86. And that's changed the lot fabric, so some spot zoning that's in the subdivision no longer lines up with some of the lots, and that's what we're looking to correct. So if I can show you the zoning on the subject site's in black. The original zoning in Riverview is the R12-3 with a holding provision, and then in 2005 some spot zoning was applied, the R12-4, and that reduced the lot frontage for single detached houses from 10 meters down to 9, and was applied throughout the subdivision. So those houses were built out in Phase A, but those reduced frontages were taken out of Phase B. So the intent of this application is effectively to restore the R12-3 zoning throughout Phase B. I'll note that our initial submission had asked to lift the holding provision as well because the timing was working out. We've gone through a little bit more technical review since then and have identified that that holding provision does need to stay in place for a little bit longer. So you will see through council a application to lift that holding provision in the next month or two, but it's not quite time yet to lift that hold. So establishing that zoning now will allow the final approval to go through a little bit further. If I can show you specifically what I'm talking about with the spot zoning. So those lots in yellow are the ones that are affected by this the spot zoning, the R12-4. For some lots that are completely located within the R12-4, this doesn't really affect them because they meet the provisions of both the R12-3 and the R12-4 zones. But for certain lots where they straddle that zone boundary, the zoning bylaw doesn't allow lots such as those to simply meet the provisions of one or both bylaws. The portions of the lot in each zone need to meet all of the provisions of that zone, and then that zone acts as a setback line. So when we're looking at front and side yard setbacks, we have to use the zone boundary instead of the lot lines. And given the lot areas that we're dealing with and the really tight zoning, that's just not feasible. So what we're looking to do, rather than shifting the zone boundary to align with the lot lines, we're just looking to remove the zone boundaries for the spot zoning entirely and just apply an R12-3 zone as all of the lots meet those provisions. So this just shows you a little bit what's going to look like, what the zoning is going to look like down the road. Again, a little jumping ahead a little bit here, the darker gray showing R12-3, there should be an H provision on that. And just, if I can use my mouse to show you, there's another sort of lighter gray portion here, right here. That will be the subject of a second future H-lift application down the road, but that's a little bit more technical in nature, and I don't think I need to go into the details here. From a planning policy perspective, this subdivision, this area is in the Rideau Community Secondary Plan. It's designated both medium and low density residential. The medium density is actually a site-specific policy. The lots in the subdivision meets the zoning or the official plan policies for density, and all of those, all of the lots conform to the requirements. So this is in conformity with the OP. So very much a housekeeping amendment to revise some zone boundaries. The request to lift the holding provision, you can just pretend that's not there. That is in the scope of this application in the long term, but it's not part of the application that's coming to committee tonight and will be coming back for a recommendation. It's an application that's consistent with the PPS and the Rideau Community Secondary Plan. And through you, Madam Chair, welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you very much. Could I hear from staff, please?
Thank you. And through you, Madam, the application was noticed as per the requirements of the Planning Act. That included circulation to 187 properties within the 120-meter buffer. It included signage on site fronting out onto Highway 15 for visual, and it also included a courtesy ad in the WIG standard. And I can confirm to date there's been absolutely zero correspondence received in the form of telephone inquiries and/or written correspondence. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Councillor Neal.
Very quickly, it might be premature to talk about the way that you'll control for rainwater and holding ponds. I just wanted to comment that if this is an older plan, stormwater ponds may have been the kind of standard technology of the day. And there's a lot of development. In fact, I read an article about a developer who received an award in the GTA and gained 3 or 4 lots by using rain gardens, using other permeable, hard surfaces, all of that kind of thing greatly reduces the need for larger stormwater ponds. So I look forward to that consideration. It actually can make a developer money by not having to lose a couple of lots to a stormwater pond. So.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? And I don't see any members of the public, so I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the comments.
Thank you. And with that, I will close our third public meeting and begin the regular Planning Committee meeting, call the meeting to order, and ask for approval of the agenda. Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Osanek. All those in favor? Thank you. And confirmation of the minutes, Thursday, May 18th. Moved by Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor McLaren. Any questions? All those in favor? Thank you. Disclosures of pecuniary interest. We have no delegations or briefings. We have one item of business. Address 538 O'Connor Drive. And we have a recommendation from staff that the zoning bylaw amendment be approved. Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor McLaren. Questions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. And we have no motions, notices of motion, no other business. Piece of correspondence, and we had correspondence. I didn't approve the agenda with the addendum, but we had extra correspondence. And the next meeting is Thursday, June 15th. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Neal, Councillor Rosanek.